to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, March 12th here in the middle of free agency frenzy, Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined by Jason Moore and Matthew Betz.
Lots of moving parts this week with all the free agency moves. What a decision, guys, to record this show literally in the middle of free agency happening. Like, signings are happening left and right as we're talking. So Kyle and I are breaking
But no. Rookie tight ends.
But what
That's
you need
what's
to know
fun.
is how Mason
Rookie
Taylor is
tight ends.
This is what you need. But Kyle and I, we are talking exclusively next week. I think it's no Jason, no Mike, about free agency and how it affects the dynasty landscape next week. Is that correct? Correct, Kyle?
Yeah, we're going to just take a step back because at first we're going to get a 1,000 different stomach punches in the next couple of days. Right now, when we're recording this, we don't know anything because Twitter's down. It's been down, so we'll figure it out eventually. But you're going to get a plethora of this person signed, here's the immediate reaction. We're going to try to do our best from a dynasty perspective and think a little bit more long-term and give you all of that next week. We'll touch on it a little bit, but everything's updated on our website. All the information, Dynasty Pass. Jason, on the main show, that is basically all we're doing this whole week. So, we're getting information left and right. We're going to try our best to focus on tight ends this episode.
Yeah, it will be difficult to ignore the breaking news that comes in. But yeah, on the main show, this whole week is dedicated to the free agent class and really free agency. Everything here, everything impacts dynasty, right? Even more so when you have players re-sign. You've got Chris Godwin. Okay, he's got a new 3-year deal. The dynasty value seems like, okay, I'm a little safer with the injury. So obviously free agency matters here. But as far as all the changing pieces, those are much more impactful in a redraft. And so we'll be talking about that on the main show ad nauseum.
Yeah, one of the things that we added as a part of our Dynasty Pass, which was updated after the Combine, it's going to be updated with all the free agency signings. One of the things that we added in was a little tip for Dynasty managers as you're going through. So there's a section called Ballers Dynasty Tips. And I would just say this week is the best week to kind of get a grid of your league and figure out where the different stacks emerge. There's a lot of different quarterback and wide receiver combos, even tight ends too, that will emerge that you didn't know was a stack in your league. For instance, Devontae Adams, Matthew Stafford. Before this past week, you did not know that was a potential stack that someone in your league would maybe want, and they'd want because that's how people play Dynasty nowadays. I want the stack for my team. I've found in my research that over the last couple years, the free agency period has a lot of excitement about signings and trades that happen because it's March and we're thirsty for information. It's wild that the NFL can take over the news cycle at any moment throughout the year, but especially in March when nobody's playing, nobody's doing anything. The NFL is a monster, Jason. I'm very glad that you hitched our wagon to the NFL.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The NFL's undefeated.
And not, the NBA is fun. Don't get me wrong. NBA free agency and all that stuff's fun, but NFL is a different animal. I have found over the last couple years, I have a list in front of me, that pretty much every single free agency quarterback signing or wide receiver trade or any of those things, the stack hasn't really worked out. And the majority of them I have in front of me, 15 different ones over the last 3 years, most of them don't even last a year. So when people think, I'm going to get this stack in Dynasty, it's a lot more short-lived. For instance, Allen Robinson, when he signed with the Rams, it was a pretty big deal. Guys, did you know it lasted 10 games? The Stafford Robinson stack.
Didn't he sign a 3-year deal that was pretty massive as well?
Oh, it was a large deal. Part of Andy's argument back in the day for being in on Allen Robinson when it seemed like Allen Robinson was done was, McVay doesn't think so. Obviously, the Rams did not think Allen Robinson was done.
Yes.
Turns out, Allen Robinson was done. Although, actually, I think he just transformed into a run blocker because he did that a lot last year. Still playing football, Allen Robinson, in the year 2024.
Derek Carr shows up on this list a couple of times of like, okay, it's the Carr and Adams combo in Raiders. I mean, they're best friends. They went to college together.
We're going to be together forever.
I mean, Adams is about to show up on this list the third time in the last, 3 years. So
What's funny about the list, like you said, Carr's on it a couple times. Devontae Adams is on it a couple times. I mean, the common denominator here, something might be going on with Derek Carr. Carr and Chris Olave. Like, how long is that going to last, right? I mean, they just restructured his deal. So in theory, he's the starting quarterback in week 1 of this year. But I think the writing is on the wall. His time in New Orleans is probably coming to a close pretty soon. So, we're all trying to find out the guy who did this. Turns out it's Derek Carr.
And really, all I'm trying to do is bring up that in your league, there are people that they're going to be emotionally moved because they have part of this stack. And so in a deal, you can help create conversation and say, hey, do you want the other side of this? For instance, I found Darren Waller. I forgot that he played 7 games with the Giants when he was traded there. And in a league, I had Darren Waller, and I was like, oh, man, I could go after Daniel Jones here. He has that big contract. I don't love Daniel Jones, but in a super flex, I could get the stack there and see how that works out. 7 games later, Waller eventually retires. It was pretty bad. So my advice is more use this window of news and this emotional flurry that people have in your league as a chance for you to maybe get some deals done. And I would just say overall, these stacks don't work. For instance, Kirk Cousins last year and Drake London. I had that stack in a league and I thought, oh, I got 2-3 years maybe with those dudes. I had 14 games. And he's still a captain of the team, though. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Yeah, and they kept him around. They had 2 captains. They're like, Kirk, you're the one we want to keep.
Man,
I'll
it's
say
bad.
too, real quick, before we move on from free agency, like if you are trying to capitalize on the news cycle, which we always talk about on this show is a great thing to do, make sure you're looking at the details of these contracts when they come out, because oftentimes it's reported, it's 3 years, X number of dollars, and then you see the year-by-year breakdown, and it's like, oh, this is actually more of a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal, and they can get out pretty easily. So I remember last year, like when it was 12:01 Eastern, the Bears were like, we need DeAndre Swift. And now in hindsight, it looks very obvious, but at the time it was like, man, if you sold in your league that contract to somebody and like they love him, they sign him for 3 years, and you make your shot, you call your shot early is kind of what I'm getting at here. You can really capitalize on these deals in certain trades. So don't be afraid to do that as well in your leagues.
Yep. And you get all of those updated at ultimatedraftkit.com if you want to get in on all of that. But we're going to spend the majority of this episode on some rookie tight ends.
Hey, rookie. Welcome to the NFL.
We've got a good group of tight ends this year. Some derriere extraordinaires, I would say.
Nice.
Well said.
Nice, Kyle. You
Some
were
juicy cabooses.
holding on to that one.
You
You're locked and loaded. You're just waiting for that drop so you practice in front of the mirror.
I was going to say
morning.
this morning, Kyle's brushing his teeth, getting his his outfit on, his hair. He's definitely practicing that one in the mirror.
Well, now hit us with that again. Well, what are we calling these guys?
Juicy cabooses.
No. Oh, he's got a list. I can't wait. At
What
least
else you
5
got?
more, Kyle.
What
At
else you
least
got?
5 more.
A class
as
full
the show
of stars.
Yeah, all right.
I was making my hot tea like literally 5 minutes before the show. I was like, man, this is a good group of tight ends. And then it just kept going. But I overall, scouting tight ends is not the most glamorous process compared to the other positions. I think we would all admit that scouting running backs is really fun because you get to see some great plays. I personally love scouting quarterbacks because to me, I can go like, oh man, that dude does not see pressure. That translates to the next level. Or this guy slays in the intermediate area. I've said the same thing for the past 5 years of like, I love that. And I love watching that. Wide receivers, you see these explosive plays. Tight ends, you're like, okay, that was a 5-yard out. Okay, that was a 5-yard out. All right, he got tackled.
Different this year. I would say that compared to the last several years, this is obviously a much deeper class than we've had in a handful of years. Running backs and tight ends this year in 2025 are deep and talented. Even though you don't have, obviously, Brock Bowers is his own thing, and so there's no Brock Bowers in this class. But even still, there are. I mean, put it this way: we're talking about 6 rookie tight ends on this show. 6. That is disgusting. Usually, but all 6 pretty much need to be at least brought up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
so last year, It was Bowers, and no other tight ends did anything else for fantasy, really.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's how the class seemed. This year, you're going to have a lot of these guys be impactful NFL players and relevant fantasy players. I'm hopeful that you have one or two of these guys come into, an additional tight end in the NFL that is a weekly locked and loaded starter. But then you have a handful of these guys that will, for the next 6, 7, 8 years, be in the streaming conversation. You need to know who they are, because if they got a good matchup, they can get it done.
Do you guys, like, the other thing about this group is usually we would say the combine is super important for tight ends. It's like one of those things where you can see who's athletic. Of the group we're talking about today, it's like we get one of them and their scores and like what they ran in the 40. So I do think there is a little bit of information here we don't have, and a lot of these guys ran because they already have established, draft capital of like, we're sure Warren and Loveland are going to be first round picks. Some of these other guys look like day 2 guys, but I will point that out. Compared to the last couple of years, we don't have as much combine information. And then also, we're going to point out with these guys, there are different types of tight ends. There are the flex tight ends, the Kyle Pitts, Mike Gesicki's, who flex out there as basically slot wide receivers. They're the hybrid move tight ends, which is the Bowers, Kittle, even Dallas Goedert. It's like, okay, you can basically do anything for a team. And then I'm just calling one of these guys monsters, because I think Trey McBride can basically do it all. And then the way that he blocks, he's just always. And then there's the inline guys that should not be thought of as fantasy options. They just block. And I'm going to use Drew Sample as that. He was drafted in the 2nd round, but that dude should not have been drafted there for any reason at all.
Why
just a worthless pick.
Poor the sampler coming on, just catching strays on this show for no reason.
In all of the tight end data that I found, I think he might be the worst pick of any, in terms of fantasy, taken in the 2nd round and had no production. I don't really know what the Bengals were doing there. But so usually we look at athleticism, and then we also look at, for tight ends, what they did in their offense and how they dominated. We usually talk about the dominator score, but with tight ends, you have to kind of contextualize them and figure out, how did they fit into an offense? Did the offense throw a bunch? Were they just a goal line dude? All of those things. So before we jump into Tyler Warren, who is by far, his tape is so fun to watch. Anything else that you guys look at when you watch tight ends on film?
Specifically.
Go ahead, Jay.
No, I'm talking Betz.
I know you love tight ends.
Specifically with tight ends. I'm not paying a ton of attention to their NFL capabilities as a blocker. I look at that. I want to know if they can be on the field or if they're used in that way. But I'm really looking at them for fantasy football purposes. So I'm looking at their hands, their route tree, their separation ability, especially against zone. Are they good at sitting down? And that's where tight ends thrive. You look at Travis Kelce over the years. It's just like, he's just smart, knows where to go, and is that safety valve. And then you add in the extreme athleticism. So this year, thankfully, I feel like a lot of these guys, where they thrive is more in the pass catching, and they're kind of, at least 3 of them were more of offensive weapons than road grading awesome NFL tight ends. This is like what matters for fantasy.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I'll just add on top of that, I don't really scout the blocking. That's not my area of expertise. However, I will say that we've seen kind of in recent years, some guys that have been pretty high profile kind of struggle to find their role in the NFL offense. So namely guys like Kyle Pitts, kind of Dalton Kincaid to a certain degree, where it's you're not really a tight end, you're also not really a wide receiver. So you have this weird no man's land. I care for elite ceiling for fantasy, which is what we care about. We really only care about the top 6 or 7 guys in fantasy, really. You got to be on the field every snap to really have that ceiling for us in fantasy. So I at least want to know, is this guy a capable blocker? Can an NFL team trust him to be out there and get play action type stuff or things like that? Not that I want them in blocking a lot. That's not what we are looking for. But just, can you get on the field in every down, basically? I do look for that a little bit, but like I said, I'm not really scouting their blocking technique per se.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between, if they're a good run blocker, awesome, that's cool. If you're asked to pass block, we hate that, because you're not running
right
around. which means you're not getting a target. So higher pass block rates do kind of scare me. But let's start off with Tyler Warren from Penn State, who Betz apparently recently has just lowered and lowered and lowered from his thoughts. I don't know why as a Penn State truther, but one of the things I love about Tyler Warren is that he came into college just 220 pounds because he was a high school left-handed quarterback, and then all of a sudden just starts bulking up, going into the Penn State weight training room. You know this the best, Betz, being a Penn State guy. Like, are they the best in the country at just getting people ready for the NFL? Like, they've had tons of tight ends over the years.
Ready for the combine for sure.
I was going to say, they know,
I don't know about
they know what to do to get you ready to run in Indy, which I was kind of surprised Warren didn't run because historically it's like, oh, you went to Penn State. Cool, you just smashed and you're a 9.9 RAS guy. That's why Theo Johnson got some love last year out of Penn State, is because he smashed at the combine. But yeah, kind of to speak to his journey, Kyle, like you said, like played quarterback in high school, actually didn't even get recruited to Penn State because of his football. He got recruited based off of his insane basketball highlights and production. He also played baseball in high school. So 3-sport athlete who was learning to play tight end. So when you look at his journey, it's like, okay, yeah, in year 1, he didn't really do anything. In year 2, like, kind of a rotational guy. Year 3, you saw flashes. Then he finally put it all together in year 4. Usually we look for early production as a signal of talent. I think with Warren, given his background, it's kind of important to understand where he came from. So he didn't really learn to play tight end until he got to Penn State. And like you said, he kind of walked on, as a skinny 18-year-old kid and then developed into who he is today. So it kind of took him a while to get there, but oh my goodness, man, this past season was phenomenal.
Yeah, and they had NFL tight end. Like, they had Brenton Strange, they had Theo Johnson. So it kind of makes sense that his slow burn to, crazy production as last year makes sense. But the film is just really, really fun. So, Jason, you want to start off first and just say, like, what stood out to you from watching Warren?
Yeah, I mean, he is a big, strong, fast athlete with great body control for a guy that size. Like, a lot of times when you're looking at someone that's 6'6", 250 plus, they're lumbering. This looked like someone who I love, and this is kind of true of Loveland as well, that these two guys don't look as big as they are, which I love that. I love a guy that just moves like he's a smaller guy. I mean, you think about basketball players, which obviously that's why a lot of times you transition from basketball to tight end. These when you've got a LeBron James, and it's like you shouldn't be able to move that well being that big, but when you can, other people can't hang with you. And so that's what I saw, was a great athlete. Also has really good hands, caught some balls that you don't usually see tight ends come down with, mossing guys from, the ball thrown behind the defender and reaches down and gets it. But I will say that I was not overwhelmed by his tape. He's the number 1 tight end. He's going to be drafted probably number 1 in the NFL draft. He'll be most people's number 1 in fantasy. But I was not overwhelmed as a can't miss prospect. In the sense that, this was his 4th year, and he had basically his first big breakout this year. He had some production last year, but I was surprised on the production profile. And I would also see, he's not a great blocker. He can, but I would see him kind of miss assignments from time to time. And I would also be surprised, for being such a great athlete and such a big guy, I was surprised how often he was taken down in the one-on-one matchups. And maybe that is because last year we were watching Brock Bowers, and that was an impossibility. Like, no one-on-one person is ever going to take Brock Bowers down. And so you just kind of have that expectation. I actually went, after watching Tyler Warren, went back and watched Brock Bowers again, because I was like, okay, I got to remember what the college tape was like. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a dude. So Tyler Warren, 2 years ago, the number 1 tight end in fantasy was a rookie. Last year, the number 1 tight end in fantasy was a rookie. This is going to make Tyler Warren specifically, I think, over-elevated in fantasy drafts and fantasy startups. Not saying he's not worthy of being the number 1 tight end and going to be good and be drafted to be a true offensive weapon. All those things are true, but he's not, to me, the insanely elite prospect that, a generational talent type of player. This is a really great athlete with good hands for a 6'6", 256 body.
I like that take. Yeah, there's not a prospect that's as good as Brock Bowers for sure. I will say on Warren, just in context for the offense the last couple of years, they have a really tough time recruiting elite wide receiver prospects or transfers there, because historically they've been very run heavy. And this past year they switched coordinators and they actually like opened up the offense a little bit. But even so, like they didn't have a ton of talent at wide receiver. Not to take away from Warren or anything like that, but like he was the offense. Like when you think about first read looks and all that sort of stuff, like it's Warren. And then they also were using him on wildcat quarterback plays or rushing attempts or stuff like that, where it's just like clearly the offense knew this is our best player. Just figure out how to get the ball in his hands and kind of let him go to work. So there is strong signal in that as well. When you look at prospecting that, not to make the comparison to Bowers, as we've said, because he's so much better of a prospect Bowers is, but they were using Bowers in those sort of things too, where it's like, just give him the ball and let's get out of the way kind of thing. So just to point that out with Warren's kind of overall usage.
Yeah, I put together a thread of all of his Wildcat stuff because it's fun. I mean, it's college stuff, so I get it. You're going to see some of it's gimmicky. But as a former high school lefty quarterback, it's fun to see somebody who's this big take the snap and then like do something with it. But there's a couple of spots in games where the Ohio State game, they trusted him on third down, a couple of spots as a receiver, and then a couple of spots as the guy taking the snap, where it's like, you're the dude, win this game for us. So the production profile is wild too. Like 104 receptions, over 1,200 receiving yards, but Betz gave the context. Like there was no real wide receivers in there that we had to worry about. I also found this stat pretty wild that no player, including wide receivers in this entire class, had more receiving yards against man coverage than Tyler Warren. And so as a tight end, a lot of times he would get matched up on dudes that's like, is this a linebacker? Is this a safety? And he's just a better athlete than them. So at the end of the day, if there is a team in the first round that gives him the type of draft capital that we think, which is like, I don't know, top 10, top 15 pick, they're going to feed him, right? I mean, is that how you guys are seeing him, as like moving to the next level? Like he's going to get the 20, 25% target share?
Not as a rookie.
Spot.
I
mean, but he's going to grow into that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope. Pick. That is the hope. The hope is that you get, north of a 20% target market share for your team. I just really struggled. The fact that he's almost 23 years old and his final breakout was fourth year in college. I just struggled to just feel like, well, he is just that dominant, and not just that he was, just at that age a bigger, better athlete than these college kids and taking advantage of it. I don't know. I don't want to be too negative here on him because he is a very good prospect, but I've got like my worries about Tyler Warren.
Yeah, that's a fair statement for sure. He's not a perfect prospect. Like it took a while to get here, that's for sure. I've actually seen him floated around in some mocks falling, air quotes, falling to like the Sean Payton range at tight end for the Broncos, which would be a lot of fun considering how he used to use Taysom Hill in some of those Wildcat type snaps and things like that. But yeah, first round draft capital, really strong last season.
I mean, I don't know, man. The last time that the Broncos took a first round pick for a lefty quarterback, it didn't work that well.
Hey, they won a playoff game with him.
Quarterback who was basically a tight end. There's a lot of Tim Tebow here in Tyler Warren.
Oh man, so good.
I would say that I can look at Trey McBride's production profile and say it's pretty much the exact same trajectory of final year, 90 catches, and they're just in the same class of like the way that they move on the field after the catch too. That's the kind of stuff that I just want. I want a guy that's not just going to fall down. And of this group, and Mike's been talking about this offline with us, but like, I think he has the dog. There's a couple of tight ends in this group that do not have the dog. That like after the catch, I'm like, you fall down. I feel like Tyler Warren, the way he was used as a runner, is going to make a difference the next level. So I'm fine calling your shot. I think he went 106 or 107 in our rookie mock. Jason, is that too high for you in a one quarterback?
That feels about where he will go. We'll have to wait for the destinations of these other running backs and wide receivers, but because it's a lousy wide receiver draft class comparatively to the last few seasons, I think that makes Tyler Warren probably deserve to be about 106, 107, somewhere there. And also it it helps his draft stock on an NFL standpoint when a team is looking for receiving help and they have a middle of the first round pick and they're like, man, okay, maybe T-Mac's gone. Is there another guy we really see as a high first round draft pick talent? Not really, but this guy could come in and be a receiving help from day one. So, I think I think he will be a middle of the first round dynasty rookie startup pick, and that's probably where he should be.
Okay, Betz corrected me. He went 110 last week in our mock with Mike. It's
a little, a little later than what I thought.
Okay,
and what you said.
I was a liar about
Such
the
a
show
liar.
that I was on. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Next up is Michigan's Colston Loveland, who is also getting mocked pretty high. I saw in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 player rankings, he had him as 7th overall, right behind Warren.
Yeah, 6 and 7, Warren and Loveland.
Does that feel hot?
High. That was, I was shocked when I saw Tyler Warren at 6. I was like, whoa, you think he's the 6th best prospect regardless of position? And then I went and saw Loveland and was like, okay, someone really loving these tight ends.
A lot of tight
ends. Did you take
ends.
him before Warren?
I took him before Warren last week, 9th overall, and then Warren 10th. And when I did that, Kyle thought I was crazy because of my Penn State homerism. However, I told Kyle I feel like I have a bias towards these kind of more like move athletic tight ends for fantasy. Like I'm just drawn to these guys that are labeled as a tight end but get to play wide receiver, even though that probably shouldn't be what it is. And when I look at Loveland, like that's kind of how he operates. Not that he's not willing to block and line up in line, but Michigan used him pretty much as a wide receiver last year. And he didn't get to test because he's coming off shoulder surgery. But when you watch him move on tape, you're like, man, this guy is fluid. And then when he went to the combine and was 6'6", I was like, man, this guy moves so well for someone that's 6'6" and not even 21 years old yet. So I'm drawn to like the early declare status and the youth. The early breakout age, 19.4 years old, is awesome. I think context is important, though, on this Michigan offense. I'll let Kyle kind of be the one to be a little more harsh, but it wasn't the best quarterback play we've ever seen last year. Now with J.J. McCarthy, it was obviously very good. But again, very run-heavy schemes these last couple of years, and the raw data isn't going to pop there. But when you kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on Loveland, his per-route type stuff is very, very strong. So he's young. Everyone in the NFL seems to love this kid. Like apparently he's going top 20-ish. And like I said, the per route numbers are very, very good. So I'm drawn to Loveland from that like move tight end wide receiver type role. But I think he's close to Warren as far as a prospect. And I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but that's kind of how I view it.
Here's my notes in scouting. It says, I think he's smooth, but also, quote, the quarterback play was so booty, I can't really tell what he is. And then they rotated quarterbacks. I mean, their quarterbacks, Warren, Tuttle, and Orgy. I said, these guys are not J.J. McCarthy. And I like, maybe I was being too harsh, but like, I just watched the film. And so part of me is like, not really sure that him having, 56 catches, which is a Michigan record for tight ends, is that like irrelevant, knowing that like this offense was just dreadful to watch, just so bad that he was their best wide receiver lining up at tight end. And then I just maybe have some Dalton Kincaid fears. So I get why he's going in the first round, but that's like my biggest fear. If I'm giving a negative side, I can give a ton of good stuff about his metrics, but like, Jason, do you have any of those fears? Like, I see some Dalton Kincaid here of just skill set overlap.
Yeah, I see some. He's not, despite his size, he's not a powerful player. He's faster, and I think he's a better route runner than Tyler Warren, but he's not breaking tackles. He's not mowing people down. He's not, I don't even think he's really one of those guys that's, I don't know. I see him as weak. Fast, fluid, a great athlete for his size, but just like I feel like he is lacking the strength and toughness. You want to talk about whether the dog is in him or not. I don't think the dog is in Loveland personally. I'm at the point right now where I've got Warren 1, and I go back and forth between whether I've got Loveland 2 or 3. Still a very, very good prospect. If you look at the raw numbers, I think you'll be underwhelmed. If you look at them on a percent of the offense, 38% of receptions in the games he played, 45% of the team's receiving yards in the games he played, 54% of the team's receiving touchdowns. So those are great numbers. Those are, that he was an important part of this offense. And really, like Betz said, I feel like he's more of a wide receiver. Like they lined him out wide all the time. This guy was lining up all over the place and has good routes, decent hands. So there's a lot to like there, especially if he does end up in the top 20 in the NFL draft. But I kind of equate him. The Dalton Kincaid fears totally legit to me. I see him a little bit more like an Evan Ingram, where he's a big wide receiver more than a full tight end. However, he is not yet 21 years old, so he can develop more. And I don't know if that's better for I don't know if we have any takes on rookie breakout. Is it better for a tight end to be a little bit older, like Tyler Warren, almost 23, because he's grown into that man body, can get out there, can block, whatever, or whether we're fine taking maybe it takes a couple years for Loveland to, be integrated as it's usually been over the course of history for tight ends. But now I think we're going to be very impatient, very, very impatient. This is supposed to be a good tight end draft class. It is a good tight end draft class. And when they don't all immediately hit for fantasy football next year, they suck. And it's like, well, that's not fair. That's not fair, because that's not the usual trajectory for tight ends, despite Brock Bowers and Sam Laporta. Like, they're going to ruin expectations for tight ends going forward.
It's a pendulum swing, what we've been talking about. It's like, I know what my expectation was for the position. Now I have a new one, and this is what I hope everyone else. Like, Betz mentioned the metrics. He was targeted on 38% of his routes. That's the highest of any tight end prospect over the last decade. Not just this round tight end, like any prospect. Higher than Bowers, his best season. So he was the offense, but Jason also mentioned he forced 3 missed tackles on the year. It was the lowest rate among all tight end prospects, and you saw that on the film. It's just
I didn't know that stat, but that's what I saw. It's like he's not tough.
I mean, there was some film that I love. The Illinois game, he made some difficult catches. He had a toe tap. He had a 4th and 18 play where he was just the dude on it. So let me just be clear. There's a lot of stuff to like here. I just have questions knowing how tight ends, if they don't find a position, then they end up being in this nebulous world. Mike Gesicki just got a really good extension, which kind of was shocking. Has he been good for fantasy? We're
no, he has not been good.
He had 1 year.
He's had games, moments. I don't even know if you'd call a full year. Being top 10 at a tight end is irrelevant.
I think he had the 1 year in Miami, right, where he was a top 10 guy.
Yeah.
But
even that was
that's
not
what I'm saying.
great.
That year was irrelevant. There was just more weeks you could stream him, and to be clear, that's what most of these tight ends are going to be when they come out. But what Loveland has is the ability and possibly the draft capital to break into the every week starter. There's 3 guys here, as I see it, that have the ability and might have the draft capital to become their NFL team's primary or secondary offensive weapon. And so for fantasy purposes, everyone else is it doesn't matter. You're going to stream guys, and it does, pick up Tyler Conklin or pick up, Mason Taylor, whoever it's going to be, whatever.
Or Mason Taylor.
No, and I like Mason Taylor as a prospect. There's a lot of things to like, but he's not going to be a breakout, sensational lead an NFL team in offensive categories for fantasy football purposes. That's what matters. So these first 3 guys to me are the ones that have a chance to go into the Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Jimmy Graham, George Kittle, a couple year run of being one of the 3 best tight ends.
Before we move on from
any
Loveland,
final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to bring it back up again about the missed tackle thing. I didn't watch any of him from 2 years ago, but I wonder what those numbers look like. We probably could look them up right now or after the show and see if it changed his play style at all, because he played through the shoulder. He had to have surgery on his AC joint, which is just painful to play through as a tight end, especially if you're trying to block and you're landing on your shoulder all the time. I wonder if they were like kind of like, dude, just stay on the field. Like, don't worry about these extra yards unless you have to, kind of thing. I just wonder if that played into how he operated this year as far as when he got the ball in his hands. But I'd be interested to see what his tape looked like 2 years ago because I didn't really look at that super closely.
But with tight end, I mean, do you have it? Do you have
That's the
the
question.
dog? And
That's
I
the
want
question.
to say this next player, I think he has it. I think that this dude, when Harold Fannon Jr. catches the ball, the only way I could describe it in my notes is like he's set up like a boxer. Like he just wants to punch you right afterwards and ready to go toe-to-toe. So really, really fun tape. Harold Fannon Jr. out of Bowling Green. He's only 20 years old. He came into college as a 0-star recruit, as basically a linebacker safety, and then over time he became a video game character. I was talking with JJ Zachariason the other day, and he said he actually played with Fannon before he knew he was a prospect. He's like, this guy's a fun little video game character. And then he puts up insane numbers for a tight end. And if the context of the offense is important because it's rare to say that a offense is tight end centric. It just doesn't happen in any level, but that's what Bowling Green was. And I mean, just some unreal numbers. The highest in basically so many categories: yards per team pass attempt, highest dominator rating, yards per route run, like all of the stats that we talk about advanced metrics. He leads the class and he leads a lot of things over the last decade. So production wise, I don't think any of us are going to argue about Fannon because it's elite. It's the best of the best. He won't go in the first round. And so what he is in the next level is a big question because he gets a lot of manufactured touches. The route tree isn't crazy, but it's a really fun tape. So, Jason, what did you see with Fannon? Does he have the dog?
He's got the dog. There's no doubt he's got the dog. Does he have the talent to?
Oh, no.
Does he have the talent and the athleticism to do it at the NFL level? And I had such a hard time with Fannon. I still have such a hard time with him. This is the guy that I might put at 2. I kind of love him. But when I watch the film, I'm like, why can't they tackle him? He doesn't look strong. He doesn't look fast, but he's breaking every tackle. He's pulling away from guys. He stiff arms someone and slowly, he's boxing them. He's just boxing these guys. It's bizarro world to me where I look, he comes at the combine, tests like a mediocre athlete, like an NFL athlete, but he's not breaking. Usually for tight ends, you want a super, super athletic tight end. That's where the combine probably matters more for that position for fantasy than for any of the other positions we care about. And he wasn't fantastic there. Didn't run a fast 40. And then you watch film and you're like, yeah, he doesn't run fast. He looks like he's got, like his legs weigh 100 pounds each. And but he gets it done over and over and over. And so then I was worried, well, he's playing for Bowling Green.
200-pound legs, and the rest of his body is, 41 pounds?
Exactly. And so I am thinking, okay, it's Bowling Green. He's playing a bunch of, inferior athletes. And for that team, he is a star. But then you go and watch the big games. I think there was a game against Penn State. And the most amazing athletic training staff in the country there, getting everybody combine ready, and he's breaking tackles, and people aren't catching. He's doing the exact same thing there that he did elsewhere. And so I guess it's one of those things where I have a hard time saying, well, what I saw on tape might not be good enough, what his measurables might not be good enough, but every single time that he played football, he was awesome. Everybody on the other side of the field knew it was Fannon. He was their offense. Stop him. No one could. Over and over and over. Big games. No one did. He's a baby boy. He's the youngest. I think he's the youngest tight end in this draft class, or at least of the ones we're scouting and talking about today, he's the youngest. He's a young guy with the dog in him. Unbelievable production. And I'm going to go ahead and personally side less on my own film watching and, my own ego of like, I'm not sure about this. And I'm going to lean more on the side of he's always done it. I'm going to wait until he doesn't do it before I'm out. So I'm in on Fannon.
I love it. It's funny you mentioned the like you watch him and then you ask yourself, you're like, how does he keep doing this? Because there are so many plays where like I would watch and then I would like put my head down to take a note because I thought the play was over, and I look back up like 2 seconds later and he's still running into the end zone. I'm like, wait, is this the same play? And I'd rewind it and watch it again. I'm like, how is he doing this? Because I'm with you. He doesn't look like a specimen on the field or anything like that. He doesn't move incredibly, but he just gets it done. And I don't really know how, quite honestly, but the peripheral metrics are off the charts for this guy. And like you, Jason, I immediately was like, okay, it's Bowling Green, like, so what? And then you watch him against Penn State, which he went for 11 catches, 137 yards and a touchdown. And Texas A&M, 8 catches, 145 yards and a touchdown. So like that's legit competition.
Exactly.
And he was showing up. And there's one play going around on Twitter of him as a blocker against Abdul Carter, who might be the first pick in the draft, and he knocks him back like 5 yards on a run blocking snap. So I just think
he is a good blocker.
I think he can play.
And you look at his zone, over 4 yards per reception against zone, and that's what I want in tight end. So, yeah, I like it.
His comps, like if you start to look at that, he's a little bit, underweight. He's only 241. Usually we want to be that up, around 250, 255. Not as tall as some of these other prospects. His RAS score wasn't as high. Let's say he ends up as a 3rd-round pick. The comps for him around here are like Isaiah Likely, who we would say is a really fun tight end. We see what can work at the NFL level. He's in his final year. Gerald Everett is a tight end that when he was drafted, I know now we're like, he never broke out. He was taken 44th overall by Sean McVay, and who thought this is the dude. So I think at the end of the day, this is a player that I really like. I'll probably bet on him in my draft and just hope that like it continues. But I think he's more than just a receiver. Like we could just go in and say, look at the receiving production. That's all he is. He can't really do anything at the next level. I think he can block. So Gerald Everett, Isaiah Likely, Juwan Johnson were the best comps that I could find in terms of size, speed, all those things. And those are good NFL players. Now we want a higher ceiling than that for fantasy than those guys, but he's a fun prospect. Like I'm just going to be rooting for him regardless.
I'm really curious where he gets drafted. But like to me, his profile says he should be, right there at the back of the first round as a first-round prospect. And I don't think that's where he's being mocked right now. So TBD, but hopefully someone is excited about him as, an important offensive piece.
And I will say, too, real quick before we move on, with Fannon, Kyle and I were talking a little bit pre-show about this with some of the draft capital inputs and things that we look at, where it's like a running back, a quarterback, obviously, but running back and wide receiver, like it matters so much. At tight end, there's hits all the time from 4th-round picks, and even 5th-round picks, and sometimes these first-round guys bust. So I will say, like, if he falls to the 3rd round, you might feel like, it's kind of disappointing. But if you, and I think we all feel this way, have him over somebody like a Mason Taylor, who I think probably is going to get drafted higher. The NFL seems to love Mason Taylor. I'm not sure what's going on, but they love him. And so like if Mason Taylor goes like 49th overall and Harold Fannon falls to the 3rd round, I don't think you should let draft capital for fantasy push you away from Fannon is kind of what I'm getting at. So I hope he's a day 2 pick at least. But I will say, even if he falls a little bit, I don't think you should be out. I think he might even become an awesome value in rookie drafts if that's the case.
Yeah, just what Betz was referencing, and it's a little tease here, but I've been looking at draft capital for players, and that's like a final data point. And Jason, I haven't even mentioned this to you. Like, draft capital tells us, here's what the NFL thinks about this player. The problem is, this is what one NFL team thinks about this player, where we do have a little bit of a consensus, during the mock draft season. It's not perfect, but it's another data point. So some teams reach on a player. They take Henry Ruggs way higher than we thought. And the Raiders did that for years, right? They would take players way ahead of the board. Sometimes if you're jumping ahead of the consensus, then it's not always the best thing. And at tight end, I found that if you're jumping way ahead of the consensus, it's usually a bad thing. Like you're jumping ahead of what the production and everything else says. So
wait, just to clarify or verify what you're saying that when an NFL team way overdrafts a tight end based on where they were projected to go, it doesn't work out.
It usually doesn't work out. So like the Cardinals last year took Tip Raymond in the 3rd round.
He's a pure blocker.
Right.
I mean, I don't even know that didn't work out.
Right, but so he's just an example of like he went way higher than where most people had him. There's a lot of guys in the second and third round at tight end that really the only hit has been Jonnu Smith, who took a very long time to get there for fantasy. I'm not even talking about just for the NFL. For the NFL purposes, it's been really, really bad. So I'm working on that, working on the data for that, and I should have that out soon. Let's take a quick break, and we got a couple more prospects. Next name we're going to talk about is Miami's Elijah Arroyo, who is a redshirt junior, and I think that is important because if you look at the first 3 years of his career, you see 11 total receptions. And it's like, okay, well, what are we doing here? Well, he played 4 games as a sophomore, tore his ACL, and then a really, really slow recovery in his junior year. So really he had a couple years just completely wiped out. They didn't really matter. But he was a really highly recruited. He was the 4th tight end nationally, right behind some guy named Brock Bowers as a high schooler. So like he came in as a big deal. Miami's always had a lot of good tight ends over the years. You can even think of the really big names back in the day, Jeremy Shockey types. But after the Senior Bowl, he got a lot of buzz, including some people like, I could see this guy as a first-round player. That's kind of cooled off. But he's kind of showing up as a guy that could end up on day 2. And watching the tape, I just want to say, like, I get it, and I get the big plays. Like, of all the guys we've talked about so far, he is the one that's seeing the targets down the field. 33% of his targets were 20-plus yards down the field. It's the highest in the class. 53% of his targets ended up in a first down or a touchdown. Highest in this class. So the big plays were there. He had Cam Ward throwing him the ball. So my initial reaction is I get the hype for him. There's just a lot of question marks of how he fits into an NFL offense. So, Jason, what did you see with Elijah Arroyo?
I was not a huge fan. Again, this is a good draft class for tight ends. You know, if he's the 3rd or 4th tight end drafted in the NFL draft, he is better than last year's and the year before's 3rd or 4th tight end drafted as far as an NFL prospect goes. But for fantasy football, I didn't love a lot of it. He's very fast as a straight line runner. You get him in space, he can house it. I mean, he was a track player, you know, sprints and high jumps in high school. He's big. I mean, here's what my conclusion, my overall note is: he's big, he can catch, he can run fast. That's it. That's my notes. Now that's not bad. To be big and fast and able to catch, that's a pretty good trifecta. Pretty important. But I guess I just saw a lot of meh to me. Some mental mistakes, boneheaded plays, and not a ton of production. Obviously dealt with quite a few injuries in college, and so you know that hurts. But the lack of production, he didn't seem like he was dominating, you know, for his team. And I didn't see a lot of the things I like to see from him as a prospect, but he is a very large, fast man.
Yeah, and to speak to kind of his speed and his ability to get downfield, like Kyle said, saw a bunch of those targets down the field. His 11.1 ADOT is one of the highest marks in this class. So at least when you look at his kind of overall picture, you're like, some of these guys, man, it's a lot of screens and behind the line of scrimmage type stuff, and then you just run after the catch with the ball. At least some of his targets were down the field, which obviously we care a lot about. Yeah, Arroyo's, like you said, like there was some steam after the Senior Bowl, and it's in this cycle of the NFL season, it's always, what have you done for me lately? Goes to the combine, doesn't test. Now he's kind of fallen a little bit, and there's some rumblings that maybe his medicals are the reason for that. So I think his draft range is extremely wide. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes early second round or if he falls to like the 4th or the 5th, you know? So he's a guy that I don't have a strong take on, quite honestly. Like Jason said, I see some fun plays on tape, some exciting, you know, stretch the seam type stuff, but there is a lot missing in the overall profile for sure.
Yeah, I think with Senior Bowl, we've talked about this before about wide receivers. It's like a lot of times it's guys that have stayed in college, they have the production, and they stand out. Like Tank Dell was one of those guys, like the production was there, the crazy production, stands out. Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, the guys we always talk about, like it matches the profile. When I see somebody with 46 total college receptions, it makes me pause. Injuries aside, it's just like it's not a lot to work with. When you watch his film, it's pretty quick. It's 35 receptions. And that's it. Like, if you're just looking at that, and then you look at all 22 stuff and you go, in space, down the field, like there's a catch and a play, Georgia Tech. He takes one in the house where it's like, oh, you are fast. Like, you can move and you take it all the way there. The comps for me, when you add in size, weight, draft capital, if he goes in the third round-ish, is Josh Oliver, who just got a second contract, but like doesn't matter for fantasy. Brenton Strange, who might have a starting role with the Jaguars and was a second-round pick. And then a really fun one, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, who was a really fun player.
Oh, yeah, ASJ. Man, that's a name I could have gone the rest of my life without remembering.
Come on, Jason.
No, I'm happy you reminded me of his existence.
I thought you were going to say happy if you never brought him up again.
No, that's a fun comp too. No, he's got some talent, but I mean, you just said it. He had 46 receptions over the course of 4 seasons. Never broke out, never dominated, never was high in his utilization and usage. Even in his final season, which was really the breakout season where he wasn't injured and he played enough games to matter. Played 12 games. 12% of his team's receptions, 14% of his team's receiving yards, a 16% dominator score. That's like, it's pretty mild, under stuff, underwhelming. And then when I watch the tape, again, if you got him the ability to run in a straight line, he is very large and very fast. And he's got good hands. But there's so much that he didn't show me that I'm, of the 6 guys we're talking about today, and I know I'm more, I feel like I'm contrarian here because he's usually higher in the rankings. He's my 6th of the 6 guys we're talking about today.
Okay. Do you guys, do you hold it against him? Like when I watch Cam Ward, we did the Cam Ward evaluation a couple weeks ago. He's dancing around the field, extending plays. They're throwing the ball almost 40 times a game. That's not normal for a college offense. It's like, some of those plays that are extended, that's not going to happen in the NFL. Like it's not going to translate. So I kind of hold that against him a little bit, that he got to play, 1, with an awesome quarterback for the college level, and then 2, that just the plays don't work.
Yeah, it is something that kind of mentally makes me go, man, this is all he could do with a great quarterback. So I do kind of hold it against him a little bit on the production side.
Poor Elijah.
Oh man.
Kyle's just dunking on him left and right here.
All right, well, we're moving on to the new Turd Ferguson. It's Terrence Ferguson of Oregon. Jason, this is a really fun fact. Speaking of throwbacks, I mentioned ASJ. Did you know that Terrence Ferguson broke Ed Dixon's record for career receptions at Oregon? Red Dead Dixon?
Wow, I did not know that. Ed Dixon, another great name to bring up. Red Dead Dixon.
What's funny is that, like, whenever I look at, we've been doing this for almost a decade. All of the references that are like a decade old now, it's like early people that like listen to the show, and now I'm like, people don't even know anymore.
I know. It's sad.
Yeah. He was the biggest combine winner because most of these guys didn't run at the combine. He ran a 4.63. And then if you're one of those people that believes in RAS score, the relative athletic score, he scored a 9.57, which is really, really good for tight ends. So Ferguson, one evaluator was Lance Zierlein of NFL, said, quote, he has an alarming lack of tenacity and fire when it comes to blocking. Like, he was just, he doesn't want to block.
Which is so funny because he has, like, I didn't know what quote you were about to read. And I thought he was going to say, like, just as a player. And it's like, that is not true. Not as a receiver, he plays with tenacity and fire and breaks tackles. And
I wrote, he fights after the catch way more than you would think. But then as a blocker, which we don't study the blocking.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so this is a player that had a ton of his work on screens. 24% of his receiving yards were screens, the highest in the class. After the catch, he's a really fun player. He can run fast. The NFL likes that. But he never broke out. Okay, so for the metrics that we care about, his dominator rating was 11%. That is dreadfully low for a player that's getting some hype post-combine. So, Betz, do you feel like the combine is going to swing him too much in our eyes? Like, I don't know. I can't figure out how he's going to work at the next level.
Yeah, I think we see guys that crush the 40 specifically or just blow up at the combine, get overdrafted in the NFL all the time. But I feel like that's a lot more wide receiver than tight end, just anecdotally. I haven't seen a lot of like early round 2 buzz on this guy after the combine, that type of thing. So I still think, looking at draft capital, I don't think he's going to go super, super high. I will say the things that we care about, though, in fantasy, when you look at historically, what hits is athleticism based off combine testing and the ability to work with the ball in your hands after the catch and yards per route run. And he does check those boxes. So before the combine, I was like, do we really even care? And then I saw that and went back and watched him, and I was like, okay, like he can play a little bit. He can make, create some stuff with the ball in his hands, like you mentioned, with his yak ability. He did lead the class in yards after catch per reception. Now, when you're targeted on a lot of screens, that's going to happen versus somebody who's a downfield player, but he did do that, so you got to give him credit there. And he was just one of 6 incoming tight ends who averaged at least 2 yards per route run in their final season. A couple of the other guys that we already talked about, Fannon, Loveland, Warren, were all on that list as well. So there are some things in his profile that I'm like, okay, I can see it here. But I will say, like, 6'5", 247 feels like a little undersized for, and a lot of the guys in this class are kind of the same range, for what I was talking about at the top of the show, where it's like, is he going to be able to get on the field enough, trusted by coaches to be an inline type guy? And is he then like a part-time player? And then you're asking yourselves, how many routes has this guy been running? And so then you go down the path of like, I could see where this doesn't work. So I think worth a late dart throw in rookie drafts, and you just kind of hope the athleticism shines through, but definitely not a perfect prospect by any means.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who will play in the NFL, will be relevant for streaming options. You need to know who he is. He'll get some targets every game, and he has enough athleticism to, kind of like a Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki was an extremely great athlete. Now, Gesicki's going to have more draft capital, so he's like an inferior Mike Gesicki, but it's still like a relevant name we'll need to know, that will be rostered in dynasty leagues, and you'll be throwing him out when the matchup is a good one. But that's probably his ceiling.
A diet sticky Gesicki.
Yes,
Yeah.
a diet Gesicki.
Yeah, my final notes are just like the best moments of him as a receiver. You can see how it's going to work at the next level. Like, oh, this is fun after the catch. We care about those things for fantasy. This can work in an NFL offense. But he can't go to Baltimore and expect to like contribute for a team that just wants to run smash mouth stuff. So
no, this is like, it's like you play Foster Moreau. You know what I mean? You're like, hey, the matchup is right. The injury ahead of him, Foster Moreau's in my lineup. Okay, great. Then we'll have some fun with, Turd Ferguson's name.
Yeah. And, Jake Ferguson's trending in the wrong direction, man. Dude didn't do much this past year. So we've got some new blood in here.
New Turd Ferg.
I love it. All right. Last guy here, Mason Taylor of LSU, who I need somebody to explain this to me like I'm 5 years old, because every single mock draft, every single expert has him as like a top 50 player. Okay. And there's things that maybe I just don't understand. So this is the son of Dolphins Hall of Fame defensive end Jason Taylor. We have to mention that, respect it. He played at a high school powerhouse, St. Thomas Aquinas in Florida. So he came out as a big deal because of his name. Production-wise, for a tight end, it's fine. The touchdown numbers are really, really low, 6 career touchdowns. You can explain that away by saying there's Malik Neighbors there, Brian Thomas Jr. There's just other dudes there. I mean, Jaden Daniels wins the Heisman, throws 50 touchdowns, and this guy has one receiving touchdown. So that's a red flag. But I just got to say, I don't think he has the dog, man, at all. I feel like there's some passive moments here when I watch film.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I feel pretty strong about that one.
That's interesting. So I don't know if this counts as the dog or not. Not necessarily. I never saw him get up, get in someone's face, after a play. That to me is a little bit more dog. But I do have a note on mine that he plays fearlessly. He does not, he's not afraid of contact. He's not afraid of going across the middle. I don't think So we see that a little different. If that is
mine's
a lack
after
of
the
dog.
catch, dog.
Okay, that's fine because he didn't do a whole lot after the catch. When I watched him, I totally get why an NFL team would be all about this player. For fantasy purposes, he is very similar to what we just described about Terrence Ferguson. This is a guy. First of all, he's very young. He's not 21 years old yet, which is a great sign. I think the fact that he comes from an NFL family, growing up in an NFL powerhouse high school, and like that is good for NFL teams.
For nepotism.
They know that this, well, the nepotism works, man. I mean, Irv Smith Jr. got a long run of, extra time and options, and you see that with players that there is something nice about familiarity. There is something nice about knowing this guy has an NFL work ethic. He's been bred to be an NFL player. Since he was a little kid, his dad knows NFL football, and he has raised him to be an NFL player. And I think there are teams where that matters. He will have a longer leash. He will have a little bit more draft capital, and all those things end up mattering a little bit to fantasy football. Just more time to be able to develop, get a second contract, all of those things. So when I watched him, I saw a guy who was where he was supposed to be all the time. Not a ton of production, but he just seems like a reliable player. My note literally says, seems like a reliable player in the NFL, a good pick, not going to be a fantasy star. Like that's the line I have about him. And I believe that. I think, if your team drafts Mason Taylor, I think that's probably a good pick, so long as they're not overdrafting him. If they get him at a good value, I think he's going to add to your team. He's going to be where he needs to be. I don't believe he will ever be a target market share guy that is really, truly relevant for fantasy. I'm not going to be excited about what he could do at the next level. I mean, thankfully, because he is so young and has the heritage, maybe he can develop. Maybe when he's 24, 26, 27, he becomes, a bigger, more important part of an offense in the NFL. But I think he's a well-rounded guy who's doing. He looked like a pro. Like when I watched him, I was like, that just looks like a pro. And that was before I knew that he was the son of a pro.
You're so nice, Jason. You're being so nice here.
Not
Looks
to
like
everybody.
Yeah, I agree pretty much with what Jason said, where it's like, could you see in the next 3 years, you're like, I got the 10 and 12 season out of this guy. Cool. Like that's not really super helpful. So I agree with you. I don't see a super high ceiling here. Just for some numbers on his peripheral metrics, a career 5.4 yards after the catch per reception is abysmal. Career 1.09 yards per out run. So it's like, I think he's got pretty good hands, quite frankly. Like when they throw him the ball, he does catch it all the time. Makes some sideline grabs, stuff like that. Works over the middle of the field. But to me, way more of a helps the NFL and helps pick up a couple first downs here and there type of guy than I can't wait to start this guy in fantasy prospects. So that's where I'm at with him. One of those guys that I think will go higher in the NFL draft than he will in perception in terms of value for fantasy for us. So I think he could be like the 42nd pick, but yet I would still prefer like Fannon or even Arroyo if he goes after him, those prospects over Taylor. That's where I'm at. But like Jason said, he does have the NFL bloodlines, which I always love, by the way, reading like real NFL scouting reports. And one of the first strengths they put on there for these guys is NFL bloodlines, or like father was a Hall of Famer.
I mean,
stuff like that.
It actually matters because it matters to them. You know what I mean? Like because it matters to these organizations, to the scouting profiles, to the general managers, to the people drafting them, to the people who have to work with their agents and their family and all of that. It's a green circle on their board that's like, I'm confident this guy is going to be an NFL human being, and because of that, it trickles into their options, their opportunities, their longevity, and all those things then trickle to fantasy. So it's like we're just getting a few raindrops here off the leaf. We're not standing out in the storm, but there's still some water. There's still a little bit of hydration we get.
What an analogy.
One of my comp notes is is this Austin Hooper, and Austin Hooper had one season where he was like the tight end 6 because he was necessary. But at the end of the day, you know, Austin Hooper didn't do much. He did just get an extension with the Patriots, but only 2 round 2 tight ends over the last decade have a lower yards per team pass attempt in their final season. So, like, you look at what he was in the offense, only 2 guys. Drew Sample, who I've mentioned many times. Is
who you've already dunked on.
The stool
Poor
sample.
Drew, man.
And Brenton Strange. Like, it's just really bad when you look at his production profile. They threw the ball 42 times a game this past year, and his production's pretty meh. So, his lack of explosiveness is not good. I do agree, though, Jason, across the middle, he had some really big catches. There was a couple catches in the Ole Miss game that I was like, okay, this is good. I see what people like here, and he's young. The comps are just not kind. The production's not kind. I just think when he gets, let's say he's taken like 50th overall, I don't see that as a sign that this guy is good for fantasy. I will see that this guy matters to an NFL team.
I agree completely.
Yep.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I mean, the truth is, I think there are 3 guys that could matter for fantasy in an impactful way this season. And then there are other good NFL players who will not matter for fantasy. And so, you know, when we're talking about Fannon, Loveland, and Warren, I'm hopeful that they can make an impact and establish a role to be a fantasy relevant, consistent player, adding to the small pool of those in the NFL. And then the other guys they're not someone you need to chase down for fantasy.
Betz, any final thoughts on the tight ends?
I agree.
Okay, and are you cool with Warren ahead of Loveland? I need to know. Like,
Oh,
Penn
absolutely.
State guy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think if there's one tight end that's going to be able to like work right away, it's Warren. I think the ceiling is intriguing for Loveland just based off how he could be used in the NFL. But that's definitely a concern is like, is he a scheme fit type guy? And he could be.
All right, that's going to do it for us. Next week, we will talk all things Dynasty with free agency, give you some big takeaways. Make sure you check out the Dynasty Pass, part of the Ultimate Draft Kit, ultimatedraftkit.com. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.